Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode in our autumn series of online workshops. My name is Bertie Hertage and I'm a crowdfunding coach here at our offices in Newquay. Today we are going to be specifically talking about planning your project. The idea behind this new series of webinars is to really give you a strong understanding of what crowdfunding is all about and what you need to do to put a really good project together. So we've also got a lovely guest here. We've got Steph from the Wildlife Trust. Hello, Steph.
Hello.
Great, thanks very much for joining us. Steph has run a recently successful crowdfunding project. So she's kindly agreed to join us and share a few of her experiences with us. Great. Bit of an introduction. We are Crowdfunder. We're the #1 rewards-based crowdfunding website. As mentioned, we're based down in Cornwall, in the deep south of the UK. And to date, we've raised over £45 million for all of the projects that we're working on. And what that looks like is about 200 projects added every single day. So you get a sense of the scale of what's really happening in this industry. So a little bit about crowdfunding itself. The concept of crowdfunding is raising a particular amount of finance from a large group of people by relatively small pledges or donations. And the way this works is by creating a project page on our website, which details exactly who you are, what you're trying to do, why it's important, and how you're going to make it happen. You can come up with a convincing story which will interest and intrigue people as to what your project's all about. Once you've finished your project page, it's ready to share once you're live with all of your friends, professional contacts, and others who live within your community. The idea is to tell everyone and anyone about your crowdfunding page, with the plan that they'll visit the page, like what you're doing, and pledge or donate money onto the page to get you to your target. So specifically at Crowdfunder, what we specialize in is rewards-based crowdfunding. And that's best really described through a little example. That's a project that again recently crowdfunded with us. And on the left here, you've got Lars. And Lars has been running a pop-up coffee shop in London for the past couple of years. He had a fantastic idea that he wanted to start his own artisan bakery coffee shop in London. So he decided that he needed £20,000 to find a permanent venue for the shop. And he decided to crowdfund the £20,000 he needed to get started. And what he did was, in 43 days, he raised over £20,000 from 149 different supporters and people who wanted to see the idea happen. And he did this by offering particular rewards or services that he'd be able to deliver on once the shop was open. So, for example, for £10, once the shop was open, you could receive a coffee and a sandwich. For £50, you get 10% off all of the products in the company. For £100, invited to join them for an artisan bakery with a friend. For, let's say, £150, delivered to your house every week for a year. So, and you also might include a higher for around £1,000.
I'm on my way.
Include broad branding, will
Suggest that we carry on meeting in Oak.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Just finish this email and I'm with you.
So, this slide is an example of all the different types of advocacy projects that live in. There's quite a large range of projects. So, crowdfunding might be appropriate for you if you're a charity, if you're a small business, if you're looking to crowdfund your own book. And while there are lots of different areas you can crowdfund in, I promise you that the process for crowdfunding is always the same in every case. So, thank you so much for joining us, Steph. As mentioned before, Steph managed to raise over £15,000 in 28 days with over 350 different people. We'd love to hear a bit about and why you decided to crowdfund.
Okay, so we were crowdfunding for a project called Secrets of the Solent, which is a large-scale 5-year project to protect the marine environment in our area. So I work for Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. It's a citizen science project, which is why we thought it fitted really well with crowdfunding, because obviously we're looking to contact people in the local area and infuse them with the project sort of before it starts, get them on board and get people talking about it. So the project itself will have various arms. It will have the citizen science parts of it, sort of going and surveying our shores and our seas. It will promote local sustainable seafood, build an army of volunteers, and hopefully sort of share some of the amazing marine wildlife that we have here. So working for a conservation organisation, a lot of the time we're working, our beneficiaries are wildlife and nature, so they're not going to be on social media, whereas this is a very specific project that included lots of people and we wanted to talk to lots of people about it, so we went with crowdfunding.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for the introduction. So, as Steph mentioned, there are lots of different reasons to crowdfund beyond the money that you actually raise. So we split these up into kind of 4 different categories. First and foremost, it's the validation that you receive from crowdfunding. To take it back to Lars's example of his coffee shop, you can find over 149 people to say that they pledge onto a project where they want to see the coffee shop appear in their area, then he can prove there's a particular demand for his service. Secondly, raising awareness. During your campaign, as I'm sure you'll agree, Steph, you tend to shout about your project the loudest and the proudest you've ever done about anything in your life. And the nature of that is that you're introduced to so many different and unique partners on the way, and people who could be interested in supporting your business in the future. And advocacy. So we find those people that pledge on your project in these early stages are generally in it for the long haul. And I think that's very significant for the Wildlife Trust in that respect, because what you achieved is managing to reach out to a whole new audience whose attention you might not have had before. And by pledging on your project, they're now advocates for the Wildlife Trust and will be able to follow your progress and your story further. And fourth, we've got extra funding, which is particularly unique to crowdfunder.co.uk. So we work with different councils and corporates all over the UK who've got particular pots of funding for specific types of projects available. So one of the best things that we'll do, and we'll talk about it a bit later on, exactly about how you apply for that. So, Sid mentioned there is of course a catch, otherwise it'd be too good to be true, but there is a fee involved of 5% plus VAT on the total that you raise. And we work with a payment provider called Stripe, which charges 1.4% on every transactional pledge made. So during your whole crowdfunding process, you should account for fees of around 8%. So it's very important to think about that when deciding what your target would be and accounting for those fees in the target as well. So we call these the 3 steps to success. And what the webinar series is going to focus on is these individual sections. Planning your project, creating your project on the website, and running your project. So, Steph, it would be really interesting to hear a bit more about what you did to prepare for your crowdfunder.
Okay, well, the first thing I did, because this is the first crowdfunder we put together, was we downloaded all of the info documents that you guys have put up online. And so I read through all of those, and I created for myself kind of a checklist, a master spreadsheet of everything I needed to do every stage of the process. And from reading through those, I think we sort of came to realise that crowdfunding is kind of both an art and a science. So you need fab content, and you need beautiful images, and you need you know, exciting things to tell people, but you also need to make sure that you're ticking every single box and who you're talking to, when you're talking to them. And the only way I found of keeping on top of that was to sort of prepare in advance dates that I was going to do everything on. So that was the first step. We created kind of a key group of people who are going to be working on the crowdfunding. So I'm the fundraising officer, and I became kind of the designated project leader, but we also obviously had people in communications and sort of more marketing roles that were able to help us with the more creative side of things. We created kind of a crowdfunding planner, as I've mentioned, but we also did a social media planner so that we weren't struggling for content. Once we began, we weren't looking for content day on day. We had things planned in. We had images we knew we could use. We had permission from the people who had taken those images, and all of that kind of stuff. We'd also created draft text for our initial influencers to use when they were talking about the project, as they may not know it quite as well as we did. One other thing I wanted to mention, and given that I work for charity, another document that I found quite useful was one from Institute of Fundraising. It's called Make It Rain, and it's their kind of charity background to crowdfunding. The easiest way of finding it, if anybody is looking, is to Google IOF Make It Rain, and the first couple of links will take you straight there. So that was quite a useful thing as well.
Brilliant, thanks so much. Yeah, I think it's a really good example of how important the preparation is for your crowdfunder, because you're taking a lot of the risk out and the worry of hitting your target. You can do all of this work before going live, in terms of identifying your audience and building your content. Then you're going to be much more relaxed when it comes to crowdfunding. Have a really strong strategy in place. You know exactly what you're doing on a day-to-day basis during those 4 weeks that we recommend that you go live. So what we're going to show you is exactly the types of resources that we have available. And as Steph mentioned, we've got 3 fantastic guides at your disposal, which cover those areas on planning, creating, and running your project. They really are full of all of the facts and information that you need to make sure that you're running and putting together a successful project. So do download those. You can find them via the Eventbrite link, or you can download them straight from our website on crowdfunder.co.uk/guides. But there will certainly a good place to start, and will give you a really good idea of what you need to do to put together a good campaign. So beyond the resources available via the guides, we've got a great coaching department here of a team of about 5 people who work with all of the projects that are on our website. if you'd like specific advice about what you're trying to do, or some advice around your strategy, do get in touch. We'll include an email address for you to do that later on. So, identifying your crowd is a very important part of crowdfunding. And I'm sure probably one of the biggest questions that you yourself will have before starting. Who exactly is my crowd, and who is going to pledge on my project? So to that effect, Steph, I'd love to hear a bit more about how you at the Wildlife Trust identified your audience.
Well, once we started looking, we were actually surprised at the various avenues that we could explore for our crowd. And we're a membership organisation, so we're lucky enough to have certain people who have given us their email addresses, and so we can email them about things we think they might be interested in, or they've told us that they're interested in. So that was a big one for us. We also have staff, and we went out to our staff in the organisation. So we have people who write blogs. We asked them to put something on their blogs at the beginning of the campaign, in the middle, and then at the end as well. We have people who volunteer for the Wildlife Trust, so they may not be so easily contactable through sort of your traditional digital means, but we made sure that members of staff that work with those guys were sort of telling them about the crowdfunder, asking them to go online and check it out, and that kind of thing. We are already active on social media, so obviously we went out to all our Facebook followers. We made sure we were posting every day on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram as well, and that was filling all three of those lines did take quite a lot of time and effort, but it was definitely worth it. Other things that we did, the thing that I think was important in terms of finding our audience was making sure that the right person in the organisation was contacting people. So if, for instance, a company that is sort of connected to the trust and friendly with the trust is suddenly contacted out of the blue by the fundraising officer, that's not going to be as powerful as being contacted by somebody they already have a relationship with. So if you are going through your staff to their networks, definitely try and make or ask your staff to contact them directly, because it had a much better effect, we found. If we thought we knew individual people who would be particularly excited by the project, we got in touch with them before the crowdfunder started. We asked them to get on board and if they would promote it right at the beginning as well. So it's a lot of, again, finding your audience is a lot of sort of pre-planning work and work to put in before the actual start date. And yeah, then just hit and go.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I think what's particularly important, as you mentioned, is the more successful your approach will be, is the more personal and direct you are. So I think, as you say, if you have the opportunity to call someone, then it's certainly worthwhile doing, because you then really engage them in what you're trying to do, become very much part of your crowd. So certainly it will involve a lot of emails, but a lot of time will be well spent on the phone as well. And I think that's exactly very true in terms of warming up your audience. By picking a live date, you know exactly when your project is going to launch. You can actually preempt a lot of those pledges by reaching out to your audience to let them know exactly what you're trying to do, why it's important, and how they can help. And particularly, how they can help is by pledging on the day that you go live and sharing it with their own network. So certainly worth having a good month period, or at least a few weeks, in which to prepare for your campaign, do a bit of groundwork before we get started. Great, but thank you very much. That is very, very interesting. So what I tend to do when I'm looking at different projects on the website, and what I encourage you to do for yourself, is to think about your project and break it down into the relevant and associated interests. So, for example, for Keep the Solent Wild and Wonderful, Steph's project, we would break that down in terms of what it's about. So it's about wildlife, it's about preserving the environment, and it's quite location specific. So Solent is the channel of water that runs between Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. And around there you've got Southampton as well. So I think that's quite a strong message to know which locations are going to be interested in your project. And therefore identify some of the organisations, and when we're building your network, that might live within those areas and share an interest in what they're trying to do. Similarly with our second example here, this was a project that recently crowdfunded with us. Someone who was publishing their book called For the Love of Food, and these two guys from Manchester, they travelled all the way around the UK, detailing all of these incredible stories about independent food. And they told their story in this book, and they crowdfunded it. And for them, how they define their project is it's about adventure, really. It's independent businesses, particularly food. And the fact that they were travelling throughout the UK, talking to different people and different businesses, that meant that they had a very wide range of audience. And what they did was ask each of those businesses to promote the crowdfunder for the book in their own area, certainly within their interest to get the publicity. And our third example is Cycling Without Age. So you might have heard of Cycling Without Age. They appeared in the BBC Three documentary Amazing Humans. And it's a volunteer-led organisation which allows people to take elderly residents from care homes on bike rides around their community. And they're dealing with social isolation, building stronger communities, and it was based particularly in Scotland, and of course it's around bikes, so certainly relevant to those that are enthused and interested in cycling, and it's around elderly people. So all of us have parents or grandparents, and we often know someone who's in a care home, so it's very easy to relate to. So that was their challenge, to break down the project into the core values and make sure that they're able to direct their communications to those groups. So we've got another example for you to show a bit about how the network mapping process works. This is Fulham Palace, who put on a recent crowdfunding with us to do a community dig in their grounds. What they've managed to do is raise over £14,000 for their project from 117 different supporters. So what they would have done is identify what the common ground was. So similar to identifying the project in terms of what the interests are. So for Fulham Palace, it's of course based in Fulham. Fulham Palace itself has a very well established following, membership, and collection of visitors who go throughout the year. It's about archaeology. So the dig was part of a kind of renovation that the property is going through, and what they wanted to do is get the community involved in analysing what's underneath the surface of the ground. Very much appeals to, in particular, those who share an interest in archaeology. But the other themes would be history. That's a fantastic piece of history around Fulham Palace, which will certainly be known to local historians or interesting to groups of historians or appreciation societies or museums. And they were targeting families, so very much a community-led crowdfunding approach to get young families on the site to take part in the dig. And there was certainly an education piece around that. So teaching people about the skills of archaeology and capturing the attention of the local schools and universities to get involved as well. So what they would have done is understand those different themes and keep those very close and start to draw out a map of their network. So this is one of the best exercises you can do. It's in that first guide that we mentioned, and it really is a brainstorming exercise. So the first port of call is to get your team together, get the biggest sheet of paper you can find, and start running through all of the different groups of people or organisations that might live within your audience. And I suppose, Steph, you did something similar along these lines.
Yes, very much so.
Good, yes. So even on that initial stage will really help to identify your audience. And for example, in Fulham Palace, similar to Steph, you very much start with your friends and family. So those are the people who you can really pick up the phone to talk about your project and request that they make a pledge. So if there was a team of 4 people running the crowdfunding campaign, and at least each of those people will be able to identify 10 friends and family who could pledge on the project. So that would be 40 friends and family. So that quickly you start to get an idea of the numbers that you're trying to get to pledge on your project. And similarly, as Steph mentioned with colleagues, it's certainly something to make sure that the organisation is completely aware of that you're working for, that everyone is able to get involved on some level, whether that's making a pledge themselves or whether that is finding their own friends and family to expand the network and to get the supporters on the page. And similar to the Wildlife Trust, Fulham Palace have a lot of existing supporters. So there are people who visit Fulham Palace all year round. They have a big database, a mailing list of people who like to hear the latest news of what's on at that particular venue. So that would certainly form part of their network map. Local people. So what other organisations or individuals are based in the Fulham area around the Palace? What media attention, particular to London, the Evening Standard and the Metro. News and Digs is very interesting story, and it's that worth thinking about which type of press you should go for and what contacts you have already with what your route to them should be. Facebook is a very large crowdfunding channel, and that usually forms about 40% of the total number of pledges. So, as with the Wildlife Trust and with Fulham Palace, both have good instant followings on Facebook of people who are particularly interested in what you're doing and follow the updates in your progress. And you will have to come up with an interesting and engaging strategy for the period in which you're live to make sure you're firing on all cylinders. So that's emailing those on your mailing list and sending out updates on Facebook. Fortunately for Fulham Palace, they had lots of partners that they're working with. So if you do have any particular partners who show an interest in the business, it's worth talking to them about your crowdfund to say, this is what we're planning. Is there any way that you'd be able to assist us during our campaign? And that might be making a pledge on the project, or that might be sharing it with their own network. And are there any kind of key individuals in the area who are certainly interested in championing that kind of subject matter? So Tony Robinson from Time Team was a big advocate of archaeology, and what kind of audience does he have access to? What other individuals like him, maybe television historians? It's certainly worth plotting them onto a network map and reaching out to them via Twitter or Facebook. So why do people pledge? This is certainly an important thing to understand and to refine when you're doing this project. We find it falls into 2 different areas. Either they believe in your idea, they think it's going to do some good in the world and want to make it happen, or they want a particular reward that you have available. And where crowdfunding works best is right in the middle there, between those two steps, what we call the sweet spot. So that's certainly worth doing, is really thinking about what the motivations are behind someone making a pledge on your project, and what each of those groups within your net map will want. So, as mentioned earlier, at Crowdfunder we have access to a lot of different types of funding. So these are either corporates or councils that we work with. You can find all of the funds listed at www.crowdfunder.co.uk/funds. And the process for applying is very, very simple. So do have a look at the fund. You can, once you start editing your project and entering information, you'll have a blue ribbon at the top which will say get extra funding, and that will then direct you to the different funds available and what the application process is. But certainly worth checking out, because there's lots of funds, and certainly a pledge like that from a council or corporate can really boost your project forward. Give it the extra cash you need and the credibility that you need to demonstrate on the project. So before next week, where we'll be looking at creating your project page, do download those 3 guides that we mentioned from the website or from the Eventbrite link. Start defining and pulling apart your project. Get it really clear as to what is involved and what's important about it, and start drawing your network map. But I think we should certainly ask the recent crowdfunding professionals, do you have any key tips for our audience?
I think if I had sort of 3 key tips, one would be to make sure it's a project that you can be excited about for an entire month. You can come up with, you can just wax lyrical about it for a month at least. Definitely designate yourself a project leader. It doesn't need to be the most senior person on the team. It just needs to be somebody who can make it a priority for them for the time that the crowdfunder is running, so that you're keeping up the energy behind it. And then my third one would be, don't expect people to act if you ask them to do something once. Everyone's very busy. You'll be in your crowdfunder thinking this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to us, but in reality everyone else is getting emails in throughout the day, and it's easy to ignore them. So if you ask someone to help you once and they don't reply, don't worry, ask them again. And we were finding about 3 times no one was getting annoyed, but people would suddenly go, yes, I meant to do that, and then they would come on board. So just get in amongst it, I would say.
Oh, brilliant. Well, absolutely, I completely agree. Persistence is certainly key, and in an ideal world, people would see your request to make a pledge and they'd do it immediately. But fortunately, that's not the type of behaviour that we recognise. It's certainly a kind of do it later attitude. So yeah, as you say, that's such an important thing to keep on asking, and framing that in particular ways to keep people excited and interested in what you're doing. Great. Well, thank you so much, Steph. It's really valuable to have you online with us to share your experiences. So many thanks for that. If you have any questions about crowdfunding, you can contact us at support@crowdfunder.co.uk. And similarly, if you've got any burning questions for Steph, do send us an email, and we'll pass it on to Steph and see if she's got any further advice for you. But thanks so much for joining us. I hope that was helpful. Do get ready for the next week's webinar, and download those guides in the meantime to get going. Many thanks. Bye-bye.